because like this picture is really really wild in the sense that the at least to me personally the similarities are striking, right?
The face, yeah, the facial expression is striking.
Let me
Supposedly
just
a former,
find a comparison
there's
picture. Yeah, yeah.
there's some kind of former FBI photo expert that supposedly swears that it's a perfect match. I mean, I will admit, even as I'm about to try to shoot holes in the theory, I will admit that the facial expression, the way the mouth is, the nose, I mean, everything seems right. Here's my issue with, at least with like the she's working in a brothel in Curacao theory.
Welcome everyone. You are listening to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 22. My name is Juras, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Glenn Highcove. How are you, man?
Hello, happy to be doing our second show of the year already. It's
Yep,
exciting.
definitely same here. So without any further I guess discussions, today we are going to be covering the mysterious disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. So Amy Lynn, as you can see from the image if you are watching this on the YouTube channel, was an American woman who went missing during a Caribbean cruise on the Royal Caribbean International cruise ship called the Rhapsody of the Seas in late March of 1998. So she was 23 years of age at the time when she went missing, and she actually went missing while the ship was heading towards the island of Curacao in the Caribbean. So searches turned up no sign of her, and investigators believe it unlikely that she had fallen overboard. There have been possible sightings of Bradley in Curacao in 1998 and in later years as well. We will be discussing those sightings in today's episode. So, tourists had seen a woman resembling Bradley on a beach, and in 1999 as well, a member of the US Navy claimed a woman in a brothel had said she was Bradley and had asked him for help, and there were also all other types of various sightings of Bradley, Amy, I mean, and she, I guess, garnered a lot of media attention because her parents, Ron, and what her mother's name was. Let me just quickly check my notes. Her name, her wait, what was her name? Mother's name again? A. It was
It was Eva, I want to
Eva.
say.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. That was like a name that was like I guess hard to remember. Hard, it definitely doesn't fall off the tongue easily. So yeah. So from the image you can see this is Amy on the left side, and you have her mother there and the father on the cruise ship, the Rhapsody of the Seas, from the International Cruise Ship Organization. I guess it's an organization that I guess you know organizes cruise ships throughout the Caribbean. So some more pictures of Amy, I guess from the road trip. I'm not sure that this picture is from the road trip. This is this picture is probably from like a prior time, but you can see her with her brother Brad in the cruise ship. So, any initial thoughts on your end about like the whole case? Anything you want to like mention before we really go deep into this case?
Yeah, this is another case where I was like, what was I doing when all this was going on?
Yeah.
So I was in my senior year at UCLA when this was going on. So, and I'm looking at the month. So I think between what was going on in U.S. politics, which was Clinton was about to go through a scandal and impeachment, um, and just me being busy with my studies and having other tumultuous stuff going on in my personal life, and me probably drinking a lot of beer, I must have just totally missed what was going on with this. But it seems like it just, as we did research for it, uh, it still has a very strong following on Reddit, across other internet message boards, and there have also been
Forums.
several, several other podcasts as well. I listened to
Mm.
at least one or two of them to get a feel for what was going on with this case. So there are a lot of strong opinions about this case. It's pretty interesting. I think that it's very polarized in terms of like how people approach the topic. So I'm really looking forward to hashing this out.
Yeah, same here. So, for starters, I guess something that we've, I guess, marked in our script for today's episode, and it's a detail that I would have probably not covered or mentioned if you have not added, that part in the script on our shared Google Doc. Was the fact that she actually was apprehensive about going on this trip for some reason with her family. So, just a quick backstory how they ended up on this cruise ship. Amy's father, Brad, Ron, this man right here, he actually, I have not researched into what type of work he was working or anything like that, because I don't think that is relevant to the story. But his boss or like his company or something like that actually sent him and his family on a week-long cruise throughout the Caribbean. So that was a nice gesture from the man's company. So yeah, so initially Amy being a, wait, was she a sophomore or something like that? I mean, don't quote me on this, but she was studying sports psychology, and it seemed that she was really excited about her, how her life was turning out at that point. So, for some reason, she apparently had apprehensions about going on this cruise ship with the family. So, any further details on this point from you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit hard to find some of these details, but when I gathered from the research before this was, for some reason she was nervous about it, and some of the attribution about the nervousness was that she didn't entirely trust like being at sea and a cruise ship. I mean, I think we've all heard about, there's even videos online of like cruise ship trips that go wrong where a storm happens and stuff's just flying all over the place, and
Yeah.
being on a ship could also just be an unpleasant experience if you're not used to being on a ship, or could get seasick easily. So that was a little weird, but it was something also about being out in the ocean. Also, it's not uncommon for some of these ships to have, I think, what are called like norovirus, like kind of like flu outbreaks, where
Yeah.
the whole the whole ship gets sick, and that's never fun. But yeah, she was apprehensive, and I think later on, as we discussed our take on it, I have my own little theory about this, maybe why, but
Okay.
she had to be talked into it by her brother. Her younger brother's like, hey, this is a great opportunity for a family vacation.
Mm-hmm.
It's being paid for. Dad's got the trip in the bag, and I think at that age, I mean, even now, I might be certainly willing to go for a free trip, as much as I'm not super
I mean, as
keen
long
on
as
doing
it's
cruise
free.
ships.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
same here. Like I would, I have my own like opinion on like cruise ships, which I think it's like a pointless trip, because you're pretty much stuck on this one boat with a bunch of people, and probably like on the later stages of the trip, like I would assume the cruise ship is like covered in dirt and stuff like that, and it just doesn't really seem like a hygienic situation right here. I mean this cruise ship looks fairly modern, and this is like back in the 1980s, so I mean 1980, so late 90s. So this is like the exact ship, the Rhapsody of the Seas, that the family took on their, I guess, vacation. And these are some of the pictures from the inside of the ship. And yeah, to me, it just seems way too crowded. Like this picture right here doesn't seem like something I would enjoy. But to each his own, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
agree. Ironically, my family was supposed to go on a trip. Like there was it wasn't our idea. But one of my in-laws wanted to do a family reunion. We were invited, and we were supposed to go. And then we had kind of a financial situation come up in our
yeah,
family where we didn't end up going. And I don't know that the family had such a great time. I guess they had an okay time, but um, yeah, I mean, to your point, it's kind of like you're stuck in a hotel all day, and you're not, if you're getting nickel and dimed a lot. So,
oh yeah,
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 there's
that's
like,
happening all over the place. Yeah,
I mean, my gosh, like you're paying for this, you're paying for that. I mean, yeah, like the food is buffet or whatever, but then like there's drinks, and then then if you want to do activities on the shore, you're paying for that. There's a
oh
lot of extra
yeah, oh
costs
yeah,
associated with it. So it's not, if you want to do anything other than just basically
yeah,
be on the big floating hotel, and then you're around a lot of drunks, and like you said, it's getting dirtier, and like I think being around anybody for a week, nonstop
yeah.
can kind of wear on you.
Oh my God, like that, I would actually get so tired of the whole situation after a few days, I'm sure. And I'd probably, I would probably do as Amy did, just probably disappear off from the cruise ship. So yeah, moving forward with the story. So I guess, so yeah, so this is the cruise ship that Amy was on, and it's actually, for a cruise ship that was built, once again, don't quote me on this, but sometime in the 90s, it looks fairly modern. I mean, it probably has been renovated on multiple occasions, but it seems like a really, really big ship. Like, and for a person to get lost on this ship, like, it would actually take a long time to find, that missing person. So another interesting fact was that Amy and her brother Brad, they actually went out. I guess you can't really say they went out since they're stuck on this floating hotel essentially. But their parents, on the night of, it was the 24th, yeah, 24th of March 1998, their parents actually go back to their hotel suites, somewhere, I guess, around the midnight area. And Amy and Brad, they actually decide to stay out a little bit longer and go to the disco and listen to the local band, which was the Blue Orchid, if I'm not mistaken. Just listen to their, I guess, music and dance for a little bit. So
I have
yeah,
to interrupt for a second.
of
I
course,
can't believe it.
perfect.
It's just occurred to me. I'm looking at this photo.
Okay.
Where did he get the tuxedo from? Did he bring like what he wore to prom on his vacation? I don't understand. Maybe that's normal. Maybe I'm just
What?
very naive, but
No,
it
no,
seems like a
like
pretty
that's
formal
that's a great point.
garment.
Like, why would you
Yeah.
why would you bring a tuxedo on me? No
What?
idea. Like, this is nothing makes sense in terms of like the cruise ship logistics. Nothing makes sense to me personally. It's just such a foreign thought to me to like even go on one of these things. But okay, whatever. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not really sure. It seems like something that you would wear to the prom. I mean, it looks, that like it looks like a prom tuxedo,
It's a
but
it's a weird picture. I mean, I guess I'm not saying anything about him really, but it's kind of a weird picture to take with your sister. Like it looks like you're
you're a
taking a
couple
picture with the
almost.
prom date. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, those pictures were fairly weird, but at the same time, it was reported that they were really close. So I guess that was the case. They were like really close siblings, I guess. And right, so I guess, did you look into a little bit more of how her father actually, I mean, they dance for a little bit, right? They actually listen to this band called the Blue Orchid in the disco of the cruise ship. And they actually go to, they call today somewhere around like 4-ish 5-ish in the morning. And
Yeah.
they actually, like, I don't really remember how the whole situation logistically went down, where Amy and Brad went back to their suites, but then Amy somehow turned up at the balcony of Ron's suite, or were they all staying at the same room? Like, what was that
Yeah,
situation all about? Like, I haven't really delved into that thoroughly, you know?
yeah, that I'm not totally clear either because I wasn't able to find like exactly where she was staying or they were staying or whether, to your point, they were all staying in one big room. Maybe I mean they did the space is kind of at a premium, so it may be that maybe there's a fold out bed from the couch and maybe there's some way to all go together. And here's the other interesting thing is
Mm-hmm.
there are almost like two sets of timelines. So there's the initial timeline from when the first investigation happened, and then as some other facts started coming up and alleged facts and insinuations about the actions of some other people, then there's a second timeline that gets overlaid here that
Mm-hmm.
eventually coincides with the first thing we're talking about.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
first little timestamp we have is on the morning of the 24th at around 5:30 a.m. Her father, something wakes him up and he looks outside and he sees her out on the balcony smoking cigarettes. And then he thinks, he's not exactly sure, but he thinks it's about 30 to 35 minutes later, quote unquote, something woke him up and she's no longer there. And he can't really properly verbalize what it was that woke him up. So that's something I definitely want to get into when we get to our opinions about things. But whatever reason, he thinks maybe he heard her leaving the room, whatever it was, he noticed she wasn't there anymore. So
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I guess he gets a little bit alarmed, and that's where it seems a little bit strange that he would start looking for her right away. But and
Oh, yeah.
that's right. I
I
kind of
haven't,
wonder.
yeah, I haven't really thought
Yeah.
about that as well, since, if you would sort of like, why would you be so distort immediately? I
So,
mean,
so like possessive over this person where they are, and I mean, yeah, it's true they were out partying all night, so you might be like, hey, get, like, I guess if it was my kid, maybe I would be, even at this point she's an adult, right? But Amy's an adult at this point,
right.
so I can't totally relate yet. My kid is only 9, but yeah, I kind of, maybe he was gonna go nag her like, hey, you've been drinking and smoking cigarettes all night. Maybe you could go get some sleep because we're going to do something today. So, let's not lose the whole day sleeping. Try to go rest up. Maybe
Mm.
that's why, but for whatever reason, he starts to get alarmed that he can't find her. And then he starts,
Searching
I
the
recall,
hotel? I mean,
yeah,
the
searching
cruise?
the boat, looking for her. And at
Yeah.
some point he starts to get really scared and he asks the crew, the authorities essentially,
Yeah.
to help. So that's where they start calling her name, I think, on the loudspeakers and starting to ask other crew members
But
if they've seen her.
right, but if I'm not mistaken, like, from my end of the research, actually the parents of Amy, they decided to, like, ask the captain of the cruise ship to essentially not let anyone out of the ship once they actually
Yeah.
docked to at the island of Curacao. So, just because, like, they sort of thought that if everyone on the cruise ship, which was like around 3,000 people, once again, don't quote me on this one, but I feel like it was like 3,000 people. I read somewhere around that, that passenger ship at that time had 3,000 people. So if all of the people on the ship actually start looking for Amy, that would definitely give them a better chance of finding and locating her. But, the captain of the ship actually decided that they're still going to allow everyone to leave, and they're actually not gonna notify the passengers of what actually has happened, that there's a person missing, essentially, because, quote unquote, that would you know I guess disturb the passengers, which I think was the right choice by the captain. I mean, I would have made the same choice as well, because this is a business at the end of the day. You're only thinking about, like, the business end of this trip. You want to make sure everyone is feeling good and everyone's ready to spend more of their money on this boat. So I guess
Yeah.
he made a business decision. Thinking logically, I would have made the same decision as well. So right, so the boat docks at Curacao, and what the family decides to do is, after searching truly throughout the ship, they actually decide that they there is a big chance that Amy is actually right now on the island of Curacao. So Curacao is like a island in the Caribbean, and it's a fairly small island. But at the same time, they docked in Curacao and they start searching for Amy. So what did they actually find during their initial search? I don't think it was much, right? I don't think they
No, I
actually,
don't. I
yeah,
think that was the problem. There just was no sign of her,
yeah.
and um, after this first search, and I think after so here's once again, I haven't been on a cruise, so I had to research this a little bit. But apparently, at least on Reddit, they're saying that to get on and off of a cruise ship
Mm-hmm.
is pretty strenuous. It's like it's about as much effort as it is to get through an airport here in the U.S. in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like you're kind of checked in and you're checked out. So the cruise ship obviously wants to make sure they don't lose anybody. They have their own liability. They also don't want to let on people who weren't supposed to be there, right? Didn't pay for it. So they take some pretty great pains, I think, to
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
restrict, how people get on and off the boat, and like there's not just people getting off at different like wherever they want.
It's
There's
not it's not
certain
like a
points of
bus.
entry.
It's not like a
Yes,
bus,
yeah,
right?
exactly. There's like maybe one or two ways you can get off, and there's somebody with a clipboard or some other check-in, maybe even a laptop or a tablet these days,
Once
checking you
again,
in and out.
once again, like who wants to go on a cruise ship that you're getting like checked in like a prisoner, essentially checked in,
Right.
checked out, can't leave whenever you want, can't enter whenever you want. It just sounds like a bad time to me, especially if
Yeah.
one of your family members actually go missing. So that even adds another touch of that cruise ship lifestyle, I guess, people missing. And yeah, so essentially they turn up nothing, and and this was like a crazy line of events of what actually went down after the fact. Once they land, once they, I guess, undock into the Curacao, so they actually don't go back to the ship. And this is a, I guess, a mistake. Like I would think this was a mistake, but maybe they didn't think this through. Uh, all three family members, they stayed on Curacao, I assume, and no one went back to the ship. So, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think that would happen, right?
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know in my outline here, I kind of kick it off into the investigation
Oh
phase
yeah.
where they start,
So
they start trying to get all these other authorities involved, because it's weird, right? It's not like when it happens, if most of our cases that we're covering don't happen in what are called international waters, right? They happen in a certain
oh
jurisdiction,
yeah,
and it's pretty clear whose job it is to put in some real effort. But in this
exactly,
case, because it happens in the middle of the ocean, all of a sudden you're kind of getting these different people involved, and so now you've got at one point the FBI involved because it's an American citizen and it happens, across state lines. So they,
right,
they want to know what happened to this person, and then you have, because it's over here in Curacao, there's this Netherlands Antilles Coast Guard that gets involved, and they do a 4-day search just to see if maybe her body turns up in the water, if maybe she fell off or jumped off of the boat.
exactly,
And even Royal Caribbean, they feel somewhat responsible. They lost a guest somehow, so they charter a ship that does a kind of the same thing the Coast Guard did for 4 days, looking around the
exactly.
water. um, so yeah, there's
And
but
they
that's
didn't really turn up anything in the water, right? She was nowhere
no.
to be seen. And another interesting fact that there's like no evidence, or actually not even like any reasons to believe that, one of the theories essentially was that she actually jumped off the ship, and it was like a suicide. So people around her, like general close circle, they didn't believe that she could commit a suicide because she seemed like she was really enjoying her life at that moment. She had like a new career going for her. She also had a new dog. I believe it was like some sort of a bulldog, and she always wanted that, I guess, breed, and she finally got that dog. So it would really seem weird that she would commit a suicide, so and just jump off the boat. So I guess that's one of the reasons why the Coast Guard, the FBI, the Caribbean cruise, chartered boat, no one really turned up a body. But at the same time, like, how would you find a body in the middle of the Caribbean is beyond me. So,
Yeah, I mean shark food, right? You
I
would
mean,
think something
exactly.
like that would be
Or even like, or even if the body just, wait, would the body float or would the body sink?
it, it could, it really, I think it depends on a lot of things, but I feel like a floating body might get attacked potentially right away by, it's warm waters. There's
Exactly.
sharks out there. The other thing, apparently she was a trained lifeguard, so some people thought, well, it's not unknown for people to fall off of ships, especially cruise ships, if they hit rough surf. That was actually a theory behind some other disappearances I ran into when we were researching this. But they're saying, oh no, she's a trained lifeguard, so she should be able to swim
Yeah.
and tread water. But then I'm like, well, yeah, it is warm water, but still, if you hit the water wrong from like a pretty high height like that, a pretty great height, it's the same as hitting a wall. So, that alone could, potentially break your neck or otherwise
Right.
incapacitate
I
you.
mean, since we'll move on to like the more interesting, I guess, theories and suspicions that the family had and everyone who is investigating this case had, I guess, down the line on this episode. So another theory is that she actually fell off by accident. So I haven't really looked into that theory, but I guess it would make a lot more sense to me that if she had fallen off the boat somewhere, because she was staying at that balcony. Let's remember that fact that and she was partying and drinking all night. So falling down the balcony, it's definitely a plausible, a plausible thing for an intoxicated person. So and if I couldn't really get this one detail that I was trying to find, like at what floor of the cruise ship they were staying, but I would assume it was a fairly high level. And if you fall down by accident over the balcony, you would probably, there's a high probability that you would die, especially if you fall directly to, you know, to the ocean, essentially. As you mentioned before, hitting water from that height is the same as hitting the concrete, almost, right?
Yeah, exactly. And her father said something woke him up. Well, the sound of somebody falling over the edge of a balcony could be that. I'll give an example in my own life. Almost 10 years ago, I had a little, let's say, a run-in with somebody that was hanging outside of my house. And while I was sleeping that night, I'm fairly sure they came by and broke into my car. And I didn't. It was weird in my
Whoa.
sleep. So yeah, something, and this is like right by my bedroom window. So something actually woke me up. Like, I think I was a little bit nervous about it anyway, because it was a pretty crummy person
Hmm.
who I didn't know, but it was very obvious they were mad and wanted to retaliate. So like some sound woke me up, but I wasn't, it was on the edge of my consciousness what it was. I think it probably was the sound of something breaking.
Yes,
And when I looked outside, I didn't even realize my car had been broken into. The car looked fine. It was the window opposite of me. So I had,
exactly.
unfortunately, yeah, but like to that point,
Exactly.
something
That's a
can wake you
great
up,
point.
right?
That's a great point. I've noticed this, as of late as well. The fact that once immediately after you wake up, whether it's because some sort of external sound wakes you up or you just wake up naturally, your brain for like the first, I guess, 2 or 3 minutes does not function the way it should function. You're still like in this half sleep, half awake mode. So it's really hard to distinguish what is going on. And I've learned this because I've listened to this an amazing Joe Rogan podcast that I would suggest to all of our listeners and you as well. It was I can't remember the guest on that podcast, but it was all about sleep. So if you type in Joe Rogan sleep podcast, I'm sure you will find that in the results. And it's a fascinating podcast, and it speaks a lot about like that those first waking moments when you just wake up. You're not your mind is not really functioning at 100% essentially, and who knows what Ron actually heard or what actually woke him up. But right, something did wake him up. So a person falling off a balcony over the ledge, that's a certain possibility in my eyes. So right, but what if this was not an accident? What
Right.
if this actually was something a lot more sinister? So I guess now we will be moving into the, I guess, part of the case that is essentially the reason why this case is so famous and why this case garnered so much attention, because of the details that I guess happened after the fact, after the disappearance, were really, really creepy, in my opinion, and just really interesting, just in general, right?
Yeah, it was weird, and there was criticism about, I guess, as these things came up. One of the I think this is why I mentioned the thing about all the different people that had overlap with investigating this is there were accusations that the FBI and some of the other investigating authorities didn't do a super great job or a very complete job of following all the leads. So, for instance, there were people that said that they had wanted to get interviewed by the FBI that worked on the ship, or were connected to the case, and then months later the families checking in with them again, and they're like, oh yeah, the FBI never followed up with me, they didn't talk to me. But one thing that specifically was interesting that affected the timeline before we
Yes.
go on to some of the other sightings of her was that we thought that picture, it was thought that the picture of her with her brother, him in the tuxedo I was just making fun of, that was the last known photo of her. And then all of a sudden, as they dug a little deeper and as people kind of came back to the case in the weeks and months afterwards, it turned out, oh no, she had spent an extensive amount of that last night / morning dancing with one of the band members. And in fact, they spent a pretty good amount of time dancing, and then it looks like she was actually seen with him. It looks like depending on what you listen to and who you believe, is all allegedly, in some cases, that he was seen maybe sharing a drink with her, and they're kind of wondering if maybe something was in the drink, etc. Right before there's a timestamp of someone using her key to get into the room. So the timestamp for her key to go into the room is about 5:25 a.m.
Yes.
And there's footage of her dancing with him earlier. His name is Alistair Douglas. His nickname is Yellow. He's, once again, this is not to necessarily cast aspersions on him or say that he did anything, but there were some accusations that some of his statements about where he was, when he was, what he was doing when, that they didn't match what they actually found later when they went through the footage. Now, the footage you just showed, this was the interesting thing, was there was a professional videographer on board who was taking promotional footage for Carnival, and this was one of the people they talked to afterwards. They're like, hey, you were there with a big video camera all night. Did you get any footage of anybody? And this pops up. This is pretty good footage. There's somewhat of a timestamp. You can correlate it with a certain time. So he's an interesting character because apparently a whole bunch of stuff was done with this guy where his statements didn't really exactly match, and he was drinking, so maybe he just didn't keep track of time. The brother alleged, this is where I read at least and heard him on the podcast, allegedly the brother said that Alistair had come up to him at a timeline that was far too early supposedly for him to have known, and said, hey, I'm sorry what happened to your sister. And he said, he was just kind of in shock at the time, so he hadn't really, he was worried about his sister. He didn't really
He
put
didn't
two and two
connect the
together.
dots. Yeah, he didn't connect the dots yet.
Yeah.
How he would have known about this?
How would this guy know?
Right. Another
Yeah.
fact, this is going off the topic a little bit. Yeah, I'm looking at this footage, like at this part of the footage for the first time, and like who wants to be doing this on a cruise ship? This sounds so horrible. Okay, yeah, but let's.
It's not me. Yeah, not me. But...
Let's get back to the story.
But
so
yeah,
how would he have known that? Right? That's crazy.
He claims that somebody woke him up and asked him, so that was his excuse. And maybe that seems plausible to me. I mean, the people claim. So then the retort to that was, "Oh no, at that point we had only told the captain and nobody else." But there's a lot of like, kind of controversy about timelines, about who said what, and frankly, I mean, if I just had to give my opinion about that, I would say that, because there's not like an official log on this, and because there's so much confusion about timelines and who, even the father isn't really sure about when he noticed she was missing, and there's just like not enough information out there to really match it up. He was polygraphed, and he did pass the polygraph.
He did pass it, right? Because I couldn't like find the results. I just know that the polygraph was conducted, but
then supposedly he flashed a thumbs up sign to his friend.
Oh my god!
Right after, so it was like, okay, so you took this thing, exonerating you, and then you look like, then it kind of looks like you signaled, hey, I got away with it.
Like so, you made it.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, this guy's name's been dragged through the mud, and I feel kind of bad, but like, hey, it may
if he's innocent, right? If
he's unlucky,
right? I guess that's the case with these disappearances and mysteries. If you have a person who is, just seems to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and gets, captured by footage or something like that, on footage. I mean, and if he actually had nothing to do with the disappearance, then, well, he definitely gets the short end of the stick when, his name gets dragged to the mud, and he, is essentially probably getting barraged by all of these people who believe that he had something to do with the disappearance, as well as the family members. I mean, I'm not saying that he's an innocent guy, because he did do some weird stuff, like the fact that he actually said to Brad, Amy's brother, I'm sorry for what happened to her sister before any of this information was out, is wild. Just to think about it, because this is like such a red flag to me. But at the same time, another thing that we should mention is the fact that this cruise ship that Amy was on, and the family members, they were, I guess, taking the small vacation. They actually were, the ship actually provided a service where they take photographs of everyone on the ship, and then they charge for those pictures. So once again, some more BS cruise
nickel and diming.
Yeah, it's like some more BS cruise stuff right there. But I guess the interesting fact is that all of the pictures that were taken of Amy are now missing from the database of the pictures. So what the heck is that all about? That's crazy.
I don't know what to make of that. And once again, that's something I feel like I've, in my research, was sort of secondhand. So that was,
right.
Somebody reported that. It does seem odd. Yeah. That how would that? I mean, I guess it would be interesting if it was just that the FBI or whoever went and they just grabbed it and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't.
Could be the
case.
Didn't
bother to
tell. Could be the case. Yeah, could be the case. But at the same time, like from my research, from the sources that I've looked into, they actually emphasized this fact quite heavily. So it would seem that this sort of behavior of the crew staff, or some members of the crew staff who had access to this database of pictures, if this was the case, that they actually removed those pictures, it would correlate with the fact that Amy could have potentially got kidnapped, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's
that's
a perfect segue into what seems to be, if you were looking at popular theories for this case, one of the main theories is that she was abducted, potentially as an inside job, by one or more members of the crew, and somehow secreted off the ship and into quote
Curacao.
unquote human, yeah, into Curacao for human trafficking. That
Oh yeah,
she, yeah, that she ended up being some kind of, let's say, essentially a slave in the world of prostitution.
could be the case. I mean, you are from, you're from North America, and you are definitely in a closer proximity to the Caribbean than I am. So, have you ever heard of, I guess, prostitution in the Caribbean? Is it a big problem? Because, like, I personally never heard of about like a prostitution problem in the Caribbean. I mean, I'm sure there are brothels and stuff like that, but like human trafficking in the Caribbean, I've never heard about this being spoken as a big problem of the Caribbean.
Yeah, so that's where I feel like this is where almost I'm glad you mentioned, especially the North American part. This is where I wonder if the subconscious and conscious fears, fear of the foreign, fear of the other, fear of dying on vacation or having something happen to you on vacation. Crime does definitely happen to tourists in destinations, but this is where I think maybe fantasy starts to mix with reality, where a lot of like people are feeding their own fears into it. So real quick, if we were just to review,
Perfect.
yeah, some of these stories and why people think this way. So, as probably in part prompted by the fact that this case became so famous, and that an award or reward, I should say, for information started building up to the point where at one point the family actually ran into a professional con man who
Oh yeah.
yeah, defrauded them of 100. This guy was arrested later, but he was defrauded them of $100,000 with this elaborate story that she was being held in Colombia, and he was a professional mercenary who was going to break her out of it. And they needed to go to Miami and get her. It was like
Jeez.
this whole seamy drama. And then funny enough, one of this guy's own coworkers actually tipped off the family after he went and strung them out and didn't deliver on his promises. The
Jeez, this
people
guy's,
involved with
but
him,
his face says it all to me. Like I would,
scumbag. Yeah, it just a horrible human being. And that's I think here's the thing is, I feel like some of this, besides the professional con men and con women, because
yes.
this guy actually had even some help from someone else in the island who also got paid a significant chunk of money
Frank
for
Jones, by the way, Frank
yeah,
Jones. I was looking for
Frank
his.
Jones,
Yeah.
and then there was also a local there. I won't mention her name, but
Okay.
her own son said that she was wrong and possibly part of this fraud as well, and she got a nice chunk of change as well, especially given what the standard of living is there. So I feel like besides those people, there are also people that maybe want to be part of the excitement, or they want to help, or whatever kind of weird thing about their personality makes them want to help. So really quick, there were a couple of different sightings. So Amy had some very distinctive tattoos. She had
Oh yeah.
even she had like a gecko tattoo in one place, and like a Tasmanian devil tattoo of her own design on another part of her body, and then something else I think like on her heel. Like there's a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball on her shoulder, a sun on her lower back, a Chinese
Yeah.
symbol on her right ankle. So there were things that, you know, would in theory make it really easy to identify her versus other
Which is great.
tourists.
Which is great,
Yeah,
in this type
awesome,
of a
right?
situation, right?
Perfect. So this is where, for instance, like you said, there was somebody that said that, oh, we saw her on the beach and, had those same tattoos. And then the brothel one, I think, is especially, I think, frustrating to me because it's like this U.S. Navy sailor. So it's somebody that,
Oh yeah.
is essentially can be held accountable to his report by the FBI.
Yeah.
So he says that he was at a brothel and
In Curacao, right?
In Curacao, and
Yeah.
I wasn't even clear if it was Curacao. It was somewhere in the Caribbean, and maybe Curacao. And she says, "Oh, I'm Amy Lynn Bradley. Can you help me?" And he goes and he reports this, and I'm like, "Well, first of all, why didn't you do anything then?" And it's like, okay, well, you know where the brothel is, right? You know where you were, right? So
This is the
why?
most wild thing.
Yeah, yeah.
In this
Why
case,
wouldn't?
like this is the most like I have no idea how do you even explain this. You have a Navy SEAL. Okay, so
Wait, no, not a sailor.
Wait,
Just a sailor. I
just a
think it was a
SEAL?
sailor.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
just a sailor.
He
Yeah,
was not a Navy SEAL, but it's still the same, almost the same.
somebody in
Oh,
the military. Yeah,
yeah. Some
same branch.
obviously, the Navy SEALs are like, they're like special forces almost. They're like really, really like tough guys. Like, but at the same time, like you have someone who works for the Navy, um, for like I guess law and I guess peace enforcing, just
Yeah,
basically
spreading freedom.
right. So you go to like this brothel, you see Amy Lynn Bradley. Essentially, she tells you her name, she tells you her story, she tells you that she needs help, and you're just there smoking cigars at this brothel, and you're like, oh, she was weird. Let me just grab another beer, and I'll probably just head back to the
Time to go.
time to go.
Yeah.
What?
What? So and then yeah. Once again, it's like okay, yeah. I was gonna save some of this for later, but
Yeah.
Curacao is not a huge place. So I looked at it, and the
Okay.
population is 150,000 people, which I think is actually smaller than where my
wow.
wife is from, which is Belize. So here's the thing.
That's so small.
Yeah, that's so small. So I feel like okay. Let's think this through for a second. The point of kidnapping her to be a sex slave, prostitute, is so that she will be servicing customers every day. Okay, so this is basically like a McDonald's. People come every day, they pay money, and they get what they paid for. So this is someone that's working every day. They're not being held in reserve, or they're not like the private. In the scenario we have from the Navy guy, this isn't somebody. This is somebody that like he can come, just as some stranger in a port of call and with a relatively small amount of money, and presumably be serviced by this person. And I think the interesting thing is there's a photo we have of a prostitute that supposedly is this person or might be this person that like
Oh yeah.
it does look strikingly like her, but we're once again the source of this photo is we don't really know where this photo came from. This is a photo that's out there floating on the internet, and the face does look.
I want to interrupt because like from
Yeah.
my end of the research, like this photo actually came up when it actually surfaced in 2005,
Okay.
in the public eye, and actually the person who found it was actually just found it on like some sort of a Caribbean prostitution website.
Prostitution side. Okay.
Right. So
Well,
this is how the picture actually winded up in the public light because this person actually sent this picture to the family members of Amy, and then they actually, they went to press with this picture. And I guess this is once this picture actually aired, I feel like this was like gave this, not even gave this case a new life, but like put it on the map for a lot of people because like this picture is really really wild in the sense that the at least to me personally the similarities are striking, right?
the face, yeah, the facial expression is striking.
Let me
Supposedly
just find a comparison
there's
picture. Yeah, yeah.
there's some kind of former FBI photo expert that supposedly swears that it's a perfect match. I mean, I will admit, even as I'm about to try to shoot holes in the theory, I will admit that the facial expression, the way the mouth is, the nose, I mean, everything seems right. Here's my issue with, at least with like the she's working in a brothel in Curacao theories, and that also ties to another theory where someone said that they saw once again a woman being kind of hurried and rushed around and guarded by big tough guys at a department store in a changing room, and she asked for help or whatever, and then once again gets secreted out. Okay, so this person is supposed to serve customers. Now Curacao is a small country, and I'll tell you just from what I've heard from my wife about Belize, there's not anything that goes on that everybody doesn't hear about. So there's not really any secrets. Like the theory that someone is
Okay.
the theory that someone is somehow servicing, let's say, 10 to 12 customers a day to earn their living, or to earn, to return the investment on taking care of this person, but somehow nobody knows about them on the island, seems very suspect to me. Now, I'll give you a direct comparison.
Okay.
Belize, I think it's been closed now, but for a very long time, because Belize was a port of call for the British military, and it still is to some extent. Belize has a brothel that's right outside of Belize City.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially kind of on the way to the airport. And you know what? You know who works there? Nobody that lives in Belize. So none of the locals work there. It's all
I see.
essentially immigrants from outside countries, so immigrants from other Central American countries that are even more impoverished, let's say, than the locals, because it's so embarrassing. Like, everybody will know if you go to work there, even though there may be people that wouldn't mind making some kind of
Mm.
living doing that. Everybody's going to know that you're doing it.
I see
You know what
your
I'm
point.
saying?
I definitely see your point. It would definitely seem strange that a, quote unquote, this is how they quoted this on Vanished, all American, I guess, I don't want to get into uh, details on her like family's financial situation. I'm not really sure if they were that wealthy, but at the same time, they lived in Virginia. If, the her father essentially had a pretty sweet deal when he's receiving like cruise ship vacations from his job. So I mean, it would definitely seem weird that someone from this financial background, coming from essentially a well-developed country, from the United States, to work in a brothel. It would definitely seem weird. But I mean, I've never been to like the brothels in the Curacao, so honestly I don't know what type of people work there. But it would
But who?
definitely don't make it, it would not make sense forced that someone is forced to work in a brothel for multiple years. You know what I'm saying? Like, and is
Or
being held like against their will and can't manage to escape essentially. I mean,
I'll go even further. And
okay.
actually, you make a good point. Like, yeah, why not? Why not just hold her for hostage at that point? Because I mean, how much money could
Oh
you
my
even be
god.
making
Oh my god. If you
off of
like,
locals and tourists? Like, why not just get a ransom and put her over the border in Venezuela or
right.
someplace like that where you can't? It's harder to. But yeah, once again, like, so here's the other thing is, it's it's a really, to your point, to kidnap this person.
Yeah.
I mean, check it out. Like, just even lately, whenever a U.S. citizen gets in any way affected, whether they're kidnapped or killed by cartels in Mexico,
Yeah.
it is a big, big deal, to the point where recently there was a case where some of the cartel guys, because of
Mm-hmm.
where the places in Mexico they had to get to, they had to take a path through the U.S. to get to this other part of Mexico. It's just that's where the road is. It's a very strange
Oh,
thing.
you're talking about
So
that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
well,
Like,
so it's not the one with the Mormon family getting killed. It's a different one where
mm-hmm.
they ended up having to kidnap some Americans on their way out. I think just because they
Whoa.
were trying. They literally, when they got raided in
Mm-hmm.
Mexico,
Yeah.
they were separated from their car and their guns. So they ended up kidnapping Americans because they had a car, they had a truck, and they had guns. And they were so concerned
Yeah.
about not hurting Americans because of the blowback that they told the Americans the entire time that they had them hostage. They told them, hey, listen, we're not going to hurt you. We never hurt Americans. And then when they got to Mexico, they washed their car, they gave them their guns back, and they sent them back to America. And when those guys, and they give them back their phones. And when they turned on their phones, when they got back to America, there were all these messages from like the FBI and the local law enforcement saying, hey, are you dead? Because we're really worried about you. So that's the kind of heat you're bringing on yourself to do that. So then
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
contrast, why would you not instead get, if you wanted a Caucasian prostitute, why would you not instead use the existing black market of Caucasian prostitutes from countries like Russia and the Ukraine, etc., in Eastern and Central
Why
Europe,
would you try to
where
kidnap someone from the
right,
cruise ship? I mean, okay,
but
yeah. Let's get one thing straight. Like, logistically, this does not make any sense. However, this could be a situational thing, where like this guy Yellow had some connections, maybe his friend on the ship or something like that, like a big shot or something like that, saw Amy and he was like, I want her, to be a prostitute or something like that. Maybe, like, I'm not completely disregarding this theory just because it could be a situational thing. I mean, you cannot
yeah,
have this as a working prostitution business model because it just doesn't make any sense. why would you not, grab someone from, as you've mentioned, from, Europe or something like that, like where like this sort of activity is more prevalent. So yeah, this definitely was weird. But then at the same time, I think another big, I guess, hole in this whole case, and I could not really find any answers. And this should be an obvious question that people should be asking, but I don't really see people asking this question, is if this woman in the picture is not Amy, then who the hell is she? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Who
I
the
mean,
hell is she then? Why
it's
has not anyone over the years tried to? I mean, if she's on this website, why don't you try to, I mean, order, her as an escort or something like that, and
find her.
see who she is? Like, why has there not been, an effort in trying to find out who she actually is? So
I mean,
yeah,
it is a good point. I do think you make a good point that, yeah, like people do stupid things. So just because something is not wise to do doesn't mean someone didn't try it and then, suffer the consequences for it. And then it does make you wonder, like, well, where did this photo leak out from? If it was whatever scenario it is, how did the photo end up there in the internet? I mean, the one thing I'll say is her hair is fairly frizzy in these photos. It doesn't
okay,
really seem to match like what her hair was like before. It looks like she had a pretty, so like I say this because I'm always self-conscious about my hair. When I was a teenager,
hmm,
my hair was a lot wavier because my mom's got curly hair, my dad's got straight hair.
yeah,
I always wanted straight hair, and unfortunately, I have kind of in between. But as I got older, and I just cut it short, it's pretty manageable. But my sister's got really frizzy hair,
yeah,
and she's had to do a lot to manage it. And then my other, thank goodness, my kid has inherited the straight hair. But yeah, like so I look here, I'm like, well, like if she's some kind of down on her luck prostitute, I don't think she's getting perms. So that hair looks pretty frizzy. It doesn't look like it matches how her hair was like, though admittedly her hair was pretty short. Maybe she was giving it a lot of treatments and stuff to keep it manageable. But I would
but
say
at
that
the
it's
same,
very plausible.
yeah, but
Sorry,
that's, yeah, okay, what were you going to
the
say?
one thing I was going to say is,
Right.
there are a lot of Latina people. There are a lot of Latinas that have a very high mixture of, let's say, Caucasian ancestry. So
Oh
it
yeah,
could
of
just
course.
be that and there's plenty of people that are literally just because I know because I've worked with them. There are plenty of people in Latin America who are entirely Caucasian, never mixed. Their
Just
ancestors
from the
never
Spanish
intermarried.
backgrounds, right? Yeah.
Well, Spanish, not just Spanish, but other Europeans. I've had coworkers who were ethnically German or Hungarian,
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, and they lived in Colombia or Brazil, and that's just because their ancestors 100 years ago,
Oh yeah.
immigrated to those countries, and they didn't marry anyone else from a different background.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where I'm like, it could just be a quote unquote white Latin American.
Yeah, this person. I mean, to me personally, like, okay, like the resemblance is striking, right? Like the two pictures. I mean, just from the facial standpoint, like, just from like
Yeah,
the way like the cheekbones are like structured.
in the
Like,
mouth.
yeah, the mouth, like the cheekbones, like are a little bit lifted here. They're lifted here as well. The chin looks really similar to me. I mean, the hair color is definitely, almost identical. You can't really see the eyes from this picture because, the picture came to light in early 2000s, and, resolution back then on pictures was not that great. You know what I will say is, if this picture and this whole case happened like right now in 2020, I feel like we would have an answer, just because of how many Reddit investigators we have right now. We have like a
Yeah.
whole internet working together essentially to try to solve cases. But I guess this case just happened a little too early in the internet age for it to be solvable that way. But yeah, I mean, even the ears, I mean, everything really looks similar, but at the same time it just doesn't seem likely, like someone who, came from a close family, had like just got a dog, had a career going in, the States, in like sports psychology, something that this person probably, enjoyed a lot, and to just completely flip and just live this lifestyle. I mean, even if you are held against your will, I feel like, since this picture right here came out in 2005, so this was essentially, I believe, 7 years after the fact. So, in 7 years, you would probably manage to escape somehow, right? I mean, or because there are so many tourists in Curacao and in the Caribbean, so, and all of those sightings of her like being, I guess chased by or like, constantly being followed by, a couple of men who are just keeping an eye on her all the time, because there was this another sighting by that Canadian guy. I'm not sure if you heard about this sighting, but a Canadian scuba diver actually saw a woman who he claims was Amy, and he was 100% certain that that it was Amy, somewhere in the Caribbean on a beach. This woman who looked like Amy completely to him, she actually approached him, and she was followed by like two men right behind her. And once this person who resembles Amy heard that this Canadian scuba diver actually spoke English, she actually started almost like walking really fast and rushing towards him almost. But the two men actually caught up to her, and they, took her aside, and I guess that was that. So, I mean, it would seem that she would have a lot of these opportunities to escape, and just even logistically, from like a financial and logistic standpoint, it like would it be really that profitable to have like 3 or 4 goons all the time?
Minders, yeah.
All
It
the
just
time,
it seems like this is a lot of overhead for
I mean, for
this one. I
for
mean,
prostitute, yeah, it's
so then, but then some, like, which would mean that, well, let's just war game it out for a second. Like, okay, so maybe someone would argue, well, this is like their really special, like, Cadillac level of prostitute that they only, rent, quote unquote, rent out to really rich clients. But it's like, okay, but still the picture got out, supposedly, if that picture is her. So it wasn't that exclusive that they were, somehow putting it out on sort of the Craigslist of the Caribbean. So that doesn't really,
yeah.
you know what I mean? It doesn't really hold water. And then once again, it's like, how do you keep that secret? Like, at some point, one of those clients is going to have a heart and say, hey, like, this is somebody that used to have a different life, because this is
Definitely. Like,
this is the middle class North American nightmare, right? That this could happen to you. That's I think the big fear that's sort of generated. So, I mean, obviously other people would be sympathetic to it. I mean, there's, what middle class is here in North America. Middle class in, like, say, Latin America and Caribbean is an even better standard of living. So when you're middle class, or upper middle class in, let's say, a country in the Caribbean, you're kind of living like how a rich person lives here. So you think that would be someone that would be more sympathetic to someone that they see as maybe their counterpart from North America. You would think somebody would say, hey, like, drop a dime on the brothel, right?
Right. I mean, it's hard to explain like how all of this would be possible. So I guess, since we are probably going to be wrapping up the episode fairly shortly, I mean, just going through all of I guess the theories and all the details. Have we missed anything?
Yeah, I actually I did have if I had to pick a quote unquote favorite,
perfect,
I would. So I'm leaning towards the theory that she exited the ship off the balcony, and actually,
by accident?
Even though, well, so that's maybe because one of the podcasts I listened to pointed out, they quoted a statistic that since 1999, something like 200 people have disappeared from cruise ships. So since year 2000, 200 plus people have disappeared from cruise ships. So Amy is far from the only person to potentially exit a cruise ship the wrong way, and I think some good chunk of those are suicide. So this is where I want to talk about suicide a little bit, even though it's a bit of a downer.
Okay.
Suicide is often not as predictable as you would think. I say this because even in my own personal life, between coworkers, former coworkers, and let's say family of coworkers, I have had 3 different suicides happen to people I know. Let's say in like a 5-year period or so, and in all of those cases, especially one or two of those, it was really unexpected. You didn't think at all that anything was wrong, and in a couple of the cases, there was really no sign that this person had any. This person had a lot to live for. So that's where, and it's also a lot of people don't know this. There are actually, because it doesn't get reported in the news, there are actually in the United States, there are almost twice as many suicides as there are murders. So actually, most of the gun deaths in the United States are actually suicides. It's a far higher statistic. Yeah, so it's not unusual for someone to kill themselves, especially on a cruise ship. I saw a comedy routine where this comic was mentioning that there was a guy who was on a cruise who killed himself because his wife was hassling him about the bar tab. Like he was like he made a whole routine about it to kind of make light of it. But it was like, crap. This guy was arguing with his wife, and he got so upset with her bugging him about, I'm on vacation, I'm allowed to drink, but they had a fight and he jumped off the ship and died. Like so that I'm not so.
That's
here's the thing.
Overboard.
Overboard.
No pun intended, but like.
But yeah, so it's an overboard way to behave. So I guess the thing is, the red flags in my mind are, the family seems awfully concerned about Amy. Like before this happens, they seem awfully concerned about where she is. There's always somebody with her. They're insisting she comes on the vacation with them. There's a lot of, and then like we said, why was the dad so worried about where she was? So she's outside smoking, and then she's not there. Well, what are you so worried about, dude? Like, what? You weren't worried 4 hours ago when she was with your son and she was at a club. Like, why are you? If the ship's so safe and it's safe enough to bring your family on a vacation there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Subconsciously
definitely.
or consciously? Yeah.
Just that's a really interesting point that you made here. Anyways, like another thing is like, I'm like reading right now something online. It says that according to their statistics, not everyone who fell off overboard died. Approximately 10 of those who went overboard since 2000 were rescued, and 1 person survived. Essentially, most of those people who fell overboard on a cruise ship were on the last day of their cruise vacations. So maybe in like a later stage of the cruise vacation. Other interesting questions is like, do cruise ships have morgues? Which is what? Do they have like? Oh yeah, they have morgues. So maybe this type of, I guess, behavior is more common than people think, and maybe this is like the dark secret of cruise ships, the disappearances. Because like before you mentioned this fact, I had no idea. I thought that this was like, there were probably, if you would have told me, guess how many people disappeared from the cruise ships since like the 2000s, I would have said like maybe like 6. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not in the hundreds, but like. Yeah, like
what a way to do it. It's almost like, so the Golden Gate, there's a famous movie about the Golden Gate Bridge where it just tracked over the period of a year most of the people that jumped off of the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's a lot of people.
I bet.
I would say, the train tracks next to me, the whole system, someone kills themselves in front of the train that's by me once a week. It's very common. It just happens. So once again, in a way, if people are jumping off of bridges all the time, well, a cruise ship is like a moving bridge, right? And like I said, what a way to do it. The last day of their vacation sounds kind of suspicious. So it sounds like either people are drinking way too much on that second to last day, or they wanted to get that last vacation and enjoy themselves, and now they got to face reality. And it's like, you know what? I've lived my life. I don't think I'm going to go to work.
I would not pick my last vacation to be on a cruise ship because maybe that's the reason why they commit suicides at the cruise ships. But this is, just
It's a
yeah.
it's a sign of the sad state of their lives, maybe.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case. I mean, now that you've brought this theory up more thoroughly, I haven't really even thought about it, and now that you've actually put everything together, it actually would make sense. I mean, I'm still, somewhat leaning towards that picture could be Amy just because of the resemblance, but then at the same time, you made excellent points. Why was the family members like from the research I've done? I haven't really thought about it that way, but like I definitely noticed that the parents seemed like they reacted initially a lot more, a lot like
They
more
assume the
more
worst, right?
extreme, right? They assumed the worst immediately. Like, why would you do that? I'm not certain. Maybe there was some sort of a history prior to the fact of Amy's, I don't know, maybe mental health, mental state. Uh, yeah, who knows? Who knows? I mean, maybe that could have happened. So maybe she did jump off, the boat and committed essentially suicide at that point. But yeah, I don't think we can solve this mystery today. But it's definitely an interesting theory to think about. So I pretty much just about covered everything I wanted to cover on this case. I would assume I'm looking through my notes as we speak. I'm not really seeing any other details that I have, I guess, marked as really important. I'm sure we probably missed something down the line, but I think we gave a good, we gave our opinions of what actually happened. I mean, anything you want to add to the case, or anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, yeah, it's once again, it's always really scary to hear about someone disappearing, especially on their vacation. And once again, I mean, in a way, it kind of reminds me of the Michael Negrique case we did, though I still think that was more mysterious. At least here, there are some plausible ways where something could have happened to her. And like I said, it does kind of tap into these other fears that probably the West has in terms of, worst case scenarios of what could happen to somebody. But I mean, I really think realistically and sadly, because something like suicide is not so predictable, and sometimes people do things to themselves not for any rational reasons. That's part of the tragedy of something like suicide or even just an accident. Things happen that don't always make sense, especially to those around them. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I find it really hard to believe that she's being held prisoner somewhere to the point where, in the Caribbean. I mean, without everyone there knowing exactly what was going on. I mean, when I stay, let's say, at my in-laws' house, especially the one of the houses is like right in the middle of Belize City, where I definitely stick out, and I think she would stick out. And I can tell you, everybody notices me for sure, going in and out of that house.
Gringo.
Well, yeah, more like they think I'm DEA.
Oh,
yeah, because I have a kind of a military look to me sometimes. But yeah, anyway, that's where I'm like, I feel like that's I think my take on this, as much as it is sort of fun, I think, for people to make up or to think of scarier scenarios. So yeah.
Okay, so that's a good wrap up. That's an excellent wrap up, actually. Another thing I would actually want to add, maybe it was interesting that during the media coverage of this whole case, no one really actually delved deeper into the suicide theory. Everyone was sort of trying to find her because everyone was like almost certain in the media that she's kidnapped and she's being held captive, but no one really spoke on the logistic side of things, that this is irrational behavior, and that I mean, financially, I'm not like a prostitution expert or anything like that, but it would just seem to me that financially it would be a hassle to keep 3 goons on her all the time, the goons need to get paid. They probably earn more than the average Caribbean worker. So, who knows. But at the same time, I think we did a good job covering this topic. I really enjoyed covering this case with you today, Glenn. And yeah, I mean, I guess this was episode 22 of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. And as always, guys, leave a comment down below if you have your own theories or any more interesting details on this case. We would love to hear those, and definitely check them out. And yeah, guys, I hope everyone who listened to the podcast or watched it on YouTube enjoyed episode 22, and we will catch you on the next episode. So stay safe and peace out.